Some people have seen the agenda go out. We altered it slightly, and normally we do public participation at the start, but we figured there's no point letting 100 people ask questions before everybody, the experts have run through their briefs and everything like that. So we're going to dispense with a bit of council business if we have to. Then the presentations will be made. Then I will open the floor. All I will say is, while the presentations are being made, please don't shout out or interrupt them. I know people have questions. I know people are worried, but we all need to be able to hear and understand what's being said. I will give every one of you a chance to speak when we get to the public discussion. Okay? With that in mind, we will move on to receive the apologies for the second meeting for non-attendance. I'm not going to stand up to the entire meeting. I've got a funny feeling we're going to be here. Received any declarations of interest on items on the agenda and agree on dispensations? No. To approve the minutes of the full council meeting held on 4th of April 2024. All in favour? To approve the finance reports. 23-24, schedule of payments already made between the 29th of March and the 18th of April. I'll second that. All in favour? Schedule of payments made on the 19th of April 2024. I'll second it. All in favour? Schedule of payments already made between the 29th of March and the 18th of April 2024. All in favour? Schedule of payments made on the 19th of April 2020. I'll second it. All in favour? Right, that's the interesting stuff done. Public-private partnership jury recommendations. Maybe.
Hello, can you hear me back? No. Can you hear me back now? Thank you. Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm Robert Hooling. I run the New Climate Partnership. Now, we made a film that explains what the community jury on climate change did, how it operated. How many of you have seen it? Hands up. So, shall I play it so you can see it? Yeah. You might have a technical problem with the sound, but it will come eventually.
But it's actually about trying to inform you about what's going on so that you can make a decision. Nobody else involved is doing it.
Areas increase, how can we limit the risk? So, frankly,
I'll just think about from the beginning.
You're here today because it's actually about trying to inform you about what's going on so that you can make the decisions. Nobody else involved is doing it.
everybody's across from the middle.
The key principles that we need to focus on.
You can't increase. How do we limit the risk? So potentially quite serious change process.
There is a risk we do nothing. There's changes we can see will be significant.
And also for us all to think about in terms of the action that we need to take.
And we can respond collectively.
It will make a real difference.
Thank you very much.
It is the most sensitive location to sea level rise in the whole of the UK. What it means is that every inch or foot of sea level rise, it has a more profound effect in terms of making flooding more frequent and extreme water event that currently happen here once every 100 years, by 2070 will be on average an annual event.
There's some of these beach present days in the short term, we might expect something like this. So at this point, the dunes are eroded back, and the lifeboat station and the toilet block now in public areas. In the medium term, might start looking like this. Once those dunes are eroded, once it's a kind of direct rain attack, we potentially start to see the erosion accelerate. Whereas equipment is backed by sort of hard concrete infrastructure. When that does fail, we would expect to see quite serious erosion. The main thing to people like here is potentially could happen, rather than necessarily when it will happen.
So we brought together a group of people from the local community, a jury as it were. Over a process of 5 days, 30 hours, they will come to a set of recommendations. These will be presented to Court Council. They've agreed that they will consider them. Their recommendations will play a significant part in shaping how you respond to sea level rise. So before we even started recruiting to the jury, we set up an oversight panel. We invited about 30, 35 different organisations in the local area, ranging from surf club, the rugby club, representatives from Court Council, anybody who's a stakeholder and has some kind of say in how our community operates.
The role of the oversight panel was to build the community jury in a way that was reflective of the local community.
We wrote to every household in the area, 8,500 households, invited them to apply. We got about 175 applications. From those 175, we selected 40 randomly, but so that they were a mini representation of our community in terms of their breakdown in all sorts of demographics like gender, age, income, ethnicity, their attitudes to climate change, and so on. Then the oversight panel then decided the question that the jury would address. And the question is, how can we respond to a changing climate, including sea level rise, to support our community to thrive?
So we've been running a citizens jury to try to answer that question. We're a not-for-profit that exists to try to make sure that citizens are able to influence what happens in their own community.
I have a question, the first, about climate change. I was interested. I'd seen the banners along the A39 as well, and then when the later came through posted, sort of like solidified the fact that I wanted to do it.
I wasn't sure at first, but my wife urged me it would be a good idea.
Well, that sounds interesting. So straight away on your laptop, you went right up. Yeah, I'm not over it. I was pretty amazed that this was coming out of you.
It's easy to feel that, when you get around the sea levels going to rise up to you can feel completely hopeless because it's completely out of your control. But having, a voice that is going to be a direct message to those in power gives you a sense that at least you can try to influence the decision making. In the first weekend, we brought everybody together to try to feel comfortable with each other and able to learn from each other's experiences. I'm reassured is that the project has fatigue, which was important for me. And we heard from a number of outside commentators talking about a very simplified explanation of what is climate change and what are its impacts, and then looking at where are the emissions that are coming from locally and nationally.
They then give us a chance to go with this group to talk about what we've just heard and form any questions as a group that we might have for the speakers.
At the end of that day, we asked the jury what do they want to examine in more detail. They came back with two main topics. One was to look at sea level rise in more detail. It was clear to them that that was a key issue for us as a community. And the other one was how they could raise awareness.
We moved on to sea level rise and had a number of commentators looking at what sea level rise predictions there are related to climate change locally and further afield, and what might be some of the impacts of that.
It's a real step change away from traditional forms of face-to-face engagement. I think it's brilliant.
You have a chance to actually hear someone's views face-to-face and to build ideas as a collective. My name is Joe, or Mr. Orangeal, and I'm a teacher of English at Bude-Stratton School. Mr. Orangeal does text teachers confusing. then all the kids can spend his name. It's been great to see that the moderators have put a lot of effort into making sure that we listen to each other and to ensure that those voices who are sometimes more shy or reserved are also heard.
It's just been so well facilitated. I have dyslexia and dyscalculia, which disabled me in some ways. It's been great for me to actually know what I can do this. And finding there's great support amongst everyone there. It's been brilliant. It's been educational and empowering. They made me feel really valued by paying us for our time in vouchers. It's not a cash exchange, but it's still paying people for their time, which is, I think, a really important part of it. More than that, they made it really accessible to people, for anyone who might be looking after a child on the weekend. They make it so that they'll pay for your childcare, like pay expenses for everyone getting there and everything.
I believe that the jury that keeps up its momentum will have an impact.
The next phase is we meet for the last day when we coalesce all of the things that we put into response to climate change and give solid recommendations. We know that it's got a value because the simple fact that we held this jury will be a demonstration that there is an appetite in view for addressing climate change.
The fact that the jury exists has been a material consideration in the awarding of the recent Digital Transition Accelerator Programme funding, so it's already making a difference.
We're the first place in the southwest to get this. It's £3 million for you to look at how it's going to make the transitions due to sea level rise.
So there's a number of outcomes from a process like this. The first, of course, is there'll be a set of recommendations. So this mini version of News Population will produce a set of recommendations which will then be presented to politicians, business leaders, other powerful people within the area that are able to influence the decision. But the other thing that comes out of a process like this is a group of highly motivated, knowledgeable local people who will inevitably have a great desire to push for action.
The community engagement part is really important in developing solutions in terms of adapting to the changing climate. It has to be woven in alongside a number of other considerations. You've got the economic viability of doing certain things, whether they're also technically viable, and also the environmental impacts, whether what's being suggested is suitable, it doesn't negatively impact on the environment. All of those things, including the community's views and wants or needs, we try and feed into that overall process when we're developing business case and what the potential preferred option is.
It's been really good to see the outputs and the recommendations from the jury. One of the good things is that quite a lot of the recommendations they've made are people of things that have been started, like CTAP that is currently being developed, and the making space for sound work is already looking at things in relation to the tune on some of these, or that we can further implement that are already to a certain extent happening, but just perhaps not at the forefront of what the community are already seeing. So some of it is about communicating back to the jury in terms of things that they may not be aware of as the community essentially.
The thing that's come out of it is not necessarily coming up with a bulletproof plan of how we're going to adapt to it or try and mitigate certain aspects of it, but more a plan to keep the community involved. Some of the changes that are going to come are going to have a massive impact on everyone who lives here. So for us to be involved in the decision-making process, I think will make everyone just feel a lot more empowered. As soon as people are empowered with knowledge, they're able to decide what they're going to do with it, how they're going to take it forward.
Sea level rise in particular is going to be a very, very big issue for communities around the southwest, particularly in Cornwall over the next 5 to 10 years. We're pioneering one approach to how a community deals with it, how it comes to terms with it, how it comes to a collective response. And this project could be an exemplar for other communities facing similar challenges.
The more communities take part in this, the quicker you resolve the problem.
I had kids who I would never have thought as being especially political, telling me face to face that this was an issue dear to their heart. If I failed to represent the fear and also the hope that they feel, then I'm not doing my job as a member of the community. The main mission I've got in this project is to just try and make sure that the urgency of it is felt, but that we direct that in some positive way. We all want a positive future, but we're only going to get it if we fight for it.
So thank you very much. So that's the film of me. Hopefully you get an idea of what went on this last autumn, from September through to January this year. As I said, I run the Youth Climate Partnership. We're an alliance of 30 organisations in youth, some of them from the community, such as the Eastside Community Centre, some are environmental, such as Youth Friends of the Earth, and some are municipal, such as Bude-Stratton Council. Since 2020, and particularly in the last 18 months, these organisations have been working together in partnership to help our community respond positively to climate change. And it's very, very heartening to see so many of you here tonight, and to have seen the interest in the issue on Facebook over the past few days. Although I must admit that it seems that there are people on Facebook who know much more about what is supposedly going to happen in some of these than any of the decision makers in this group. Perhaps you know a saying attributed to Henry Kissinger: to be absolutely certain about something, one must know everything about it or nothing about it. And I hope tonight we're going to help you along that journey to knowing much more about it. Of course, it's unsurprising that there's so much interest and disinformation around this issue. The future of our shoreline is undeniably important to everyone in our community. It touches on all aspects of the way of life that our community treasures and wants to protect: our economy, our history and identity as a beach resort, our jobs and businesses, and how we spend our leisure time. And of course, the environment that surrounds us and sustains not only us, but every living thing in this area. For all those reasons, we at the Youth Climate Partnership have been wanting our community to engage with this vital issue for a long time. It's why we sought funding from the Lotteries Community Fund. We were awarded a grant because the lottery recognised that our community had a particular need to address these issues, and crucially, to ensure that everyone in our community would have an equal opportunity to become informed about all the various factors that surround this issue and to be heard by the decision makers. This is one of the first steps in this process. Last year, as part of this process, Youth Climate Partnership organised the community jury on climate change. And that its culmination and the purpose of tonight's meeting is for the town council to decide how to respond to its recommendations. We set up the jury to bring together a random selection of people from within our community to understand the facts, the science, the policies, the challenges of addressing various local conditions, before coming to a series of collective proposals or recommendations about how you could respond to climate change. Those recommendations, we hope, can contribute in an informed and representative way to the decisions that need to be made by this council, as well as by members of other councils and other stakeholders. The recommendations are not the be-all and end-all in the long process of engaging and consulting the community. They are only the first steps, not the final destination. The jury members are ordinary people just like you or me, except they have spent more than 1,000 collective hours learning about the issues. They heard the facts from trusted experts. On our behalf, they took the time to investigate and understand what lies behind the alphabet spaghetti of acronyms that surround this subject: SMP, CCDPD, NDP, and CCMA. And that's only scraping the surface of the bureaucratic, technical, and policy understanding that jury members have absorbed and digested. They discuss their responses and their thoughts openly and constructively with each other. They asked questions of experts and got the answers they needed to understand it all as lay people with a stake in this community, just like all of us. That's the process they went through, so they could make up their minds before producing their recommendations collectively. Some of the 34 members of the jury who lasted the whole process are present here tonight, and you'll be hearing more from them later. You might want to ask them some questions, and they might be happy to respond. But please bear in mind, they are neither experts nor authorities. They've spent time gaining a deeper understanding of the issues we're discussing tonight, but otherwise they're no different to any one of us. So please treat them with the respect that you hope to receive. As I said, this evening is for the council to hear and respond to the jury's recommendations. What it isn't is a forum for challenging the science, the policies that underpin the decision that Bude needs to make. If you want to delve into those topics, you're welcome. But with respect, I'm afraid you'll need to take it elsewhere, and we're happy to organise that at a later date. So why can't we challenge the policies or the science tonight? First, because we simply haven't got the time right now. It took the jury more than 1,000 collective hours just to begin to understand all the issues. And I'm guessing none of you want to be here that long. I certainly don't. Second, because we'll get nowhere by seeking to overturn national policies such as the Shoreline Management Plan, which is based on hard facts, scientific evidence, economic factors and considerations, technical possibilities. The Shoreline Management Plan applies to the whole of the UK, broken down into small sections to take account of local conditions. It's not driven by local officials or the jury or councillors. It has existed since 1999 and it's reviewed at regular intervals. Most recently in 2011 with a slight update in 2016. It was developed after extensive community consultation, peer review, as well as communities all around the country's coastline. And I remember the poster going up for it and thinking, why do I want to go along to that? I didn't bother at the time. That's the way it is. But what I can tell you is that Environment Agency officers who are here tonight brought a roadshow to Bude to us. They presented a draft, they got the community's feedback, they made changes, they presented a second draft, which they resubmitted to the community for its comments before Cornwall councillors voted to adopt the final version. Every single comment that anyone in Bude made about the Shoreline Management Plan back in 2011 was recorded. As the challenges of climate change and sea level rise have become more apparent, each iteration of the plan has seen a move away from hard-built sea defences towards nature-based solutions. The message is that our future relies on us working with nature rather than trying to bend it to our will. We've tried that and it hasn't worked. After 200 years of mankind thinking it could treat the natural environment how it wants, nature is exerting its upper hand. If we want to survive here in Bude, or for that matter anywhere else on the planet, we need to adapt to a changing climate. The Shoreline Management Plan for this area covers the stretch of coastline from Higher Lockney, just beyond up to Lower Sharpnose Point, roughly where the dishes are beyond Dunkle. For most of the coastline, the policy is no active intervention. In other words, nature is allowed to take its course. No one will be reinforcing the cliffs between, say, Crooklets and Sandringham. But within Bude, the policy changes. In the breakwater and canal area, the policy is to hold the line. In other words, whatever happens, the breakwater, seawalls, canal walls, and locks will be maintained to protect their historic value as listed properties and their vital role in protecting residential property from the sea. For the rest of Bude, Summerlees, Middlebeach, and Crooklets, the policy is managed realignment. Under the policy that in place since at least 2011. Managed realignment means using natural processes to allow the shoreline to adapt to the impacts of sea level rise. That might mean more dunes, or larger dunes, or perhaps something entirely different, but it will be nature-based. Exactly what hasn't been decided. The discussion lies ahead. But whatever form dunes adaptation takes, it's likely to mean a degree of change. And it's part of a national policy, so no one is going to make an exception for Bude. Why not? Well, compared to London, which needs a new tidal barrier by 2070 to protect the houses and businesses of tens of millions of people, you would find it difficult to persuade the authorities to spend the money here to protect the properties of a few thousand people a month. And if they built a wall in Bude, they would have to do it all along the coast of Cornwall, many parts of which are only fractionally less sensitive to sea level rise than we are here. You might think it's money worth spending, but that's money that won't be spent on hospitals or schools, or training more GPs, or building more affordable housing, or whatever else we think we need. The third reason why we can't spend tonight questioning science and policies is that few people in this room know better. Most of us only have opinions. Few of us have the facts, or the evidence, or the knowledge, or the skills to overturn decades of scientific consensus-backed decisions based on peer-reviewed evidence that climate change is happening, that sea levels are rising, and that it's going to change things for us in Bude. As C.P. Snow said, facts are sacred, comment is free. Or put it another way, opinions are cheap, facts are expensive. What it means is that Bude can't stake its future on 2 pennies worth of opinions, wherever and by whomever they're expressed. We need to rely on evidence-based facts and the guidance of specialist experts. One key factor is that we're already experiencing the impacts of climate change. The evidence is all around us, anecdotally, statistically, scientifically. In 2022, Bude recorded the highest temperature ever in the southwest. Tourism businesses told us that had a considerable impact on their ability to operate, and was part of a trend that is only going one way, up. From October 2022 to March 2024, last month, the highest amount of rain fell in England at any 18-month period since the Met Office began collecting records in 1836. In that time, 1.7 metres of rain fell. That's 5.5 feet of water. I know at times it felt like it was all falling in view. It certainly felt like the wettest, longest winter I have ever known. We see the impacts all around us. Mayor Cliff was described to me today by a coastal erosion risk specialist as unpeeling at quite a high rate. Now, this area has always had its share of bad weather, but what we've seen in the last decades, and particularly in the last 5 years, is unprecedented. It's part of a trend towards a warmer, wetter climate that is taking us off the scale. The 5 warmest years in the UK since 1884 include 2023, 2022, and 2020. The 10 warmest years have all occurred since 2003. No one here needs reminding of the graphic and tragic impact of higher winds on the triangle tree and the roofless splash, not to mention the damage to the chimney pots and garden fences of hundreds of Bude residents, myself included. Yes, Storm Eunice was a one-off event, in some ways no different to hundreds of other storms that have hit our shores over the decades, but it was exceptionally powerful and possible sign of more storms to come. Like the higher temperatures, it's probable that it's part of a trend of more frequent, more powerful, more damaging storms impacting us for longer periods each year. As an Environment Agency officer responsible for flood and coastal risk centre today, we never used to think of April being a storm month, but storm season now lasts 8 months of the year, September to April. Those increased winds and rainfall and those warmer temperatures already generate more frequent and more powerful storms in the Atlantic, and consequently higher storm surges. So a storm surge on top of rising sea levels in a period when we're experiencing heavier rainfall on ground that contains more water because it's been raining on and off for weeks or months. Sounds like a perfect storm. It is. When an exceptionally high tide meets an exceptionally high river, in Bude, as we all know, there's nowhere for the water to go but up and over the walls. It happened on a small scale only 2 days ago when the Strand flooded. It also happened earlier this month. The flooding on the Strand wasn't extensive, but it was enough to impede the traffic. And that was not an exceptionally high tide, meeting a river that was exceptionally full. Bude's exceptional problem is that only 60 centimetres of sea level rise is needed to make extreme flood events, the kind that currently happen only once in 1,000 years, become something that happens on average once a year. Think about that. All it takes is 2 feet of sea level rise, and Bude will be subject every year to the kinds of flood we currently expect only once a millennium. And that's on average. Some years it won't happen, in other years it will happen several times. So how much sea level rise do scientists predict? Under a low warming scenario, 2 feet by 2100 is well within the predicted range. Under a high warming scenario, which is where we find ourselves now, 2 feet by 2100 is at the bottom end of expectations, and it could be up to twice as much. By the way, some scientists think those predictions are conservative. They're warning that more than 5 meters, or 15 feet of sea level rise, by 2150 cannot be ruled out. And please bear in mind that sea level rise is baked in for at least the next century. The huge mass of the ocean waters takes a very long time to respond to any changes in temperature. So if we stopped all emissions now, the sea would continue rising until at least 2120. Now some people say, what about local conditions? Mean sea levels are rising here as much as anywhere else. In fact, they're rising faster than ever before. In the last 2 decades, the rate of sea level rise at Bude has been twice as fast as in the whole of the past century, a period which it has risen by 20 centimetres, or about 8 inches. Sea level scientists talk about a 1 in 1 water level event at Bude. By that they mean a high water level that happens once a year in Bude. That level is now reached 4 times a year. Bude's sea level is the benchmark, not just for Cornwall, it's the point from which height zero on maps is measured right across the UK. And it tells us what's happening to mean sea levels in Bude, just like everywhere else. Now, I promise not to go too much into the science here and now. So if you're interested, there are lots of videos on the Climate Jury's website, budeclimatejury.org. Professor Matt Palmer is the lead scientist at the Met Office for Sea Level Rise and Ocean Heat Research, and lead author of the chapter on sea level rise in the IPCC's most recent report, which advises all the world's government on climate change impacts. It's safe to say he and his team are world leaders in understanding and interpreting the science. Matt very kindly came to view. He's a surfer, so it wasn't a difficult ask. He presented to the jury. I recommend that you watch the video of his presentation on our website. I suggest you also look at the presentation by Professor Bert Basting from Plymouth University. He's a world expert on the impacts of rising sea levels and potential responses. In the meantime, tonight's meeting is for understanding where we are now in terms of the community's input to any decisions that you think need to be made. And it's to think about what lies ahead and to decide what to do next to ensure the community gets its say, so the decision reflects what you want and needs, which of course aren't always the same thing. All of this goes back to early 2022, when Bude Climate Partnership was invited by the Environment Agency to be part of a project called Bude Adaptive Pathways. It took publicly available data on sea level rise projections what's called a reasonable worst case scenario and used it to model the impacts on you over the next 40, 50, 70 and 100 years. The models were presented in the form of photorealistic visualizations that you saw in the video and then you could see at the back of the hall. If you want to know more about it, please look at the video presentation on the jury's website by Chris Inch from the Environment Agency. Now, perhaps you find the visualizations alarming or startling. When I first saw them, I felt that way. It happened in a meeting that included a few town hall councillors and officers and Environment Agency officials. I think it's fair to say that everyone in the meeting was taken aback by the visualizations, although not in the same way. One influential councillor's response was to suggest the answer would be to build a wall. But a scientist explained that a wall would mean all the sand leaving used beaches, exposing the transatlantic cables, and that it could change the surf's behaviour. The councillor questioned the validity of the modelling. A view base, they later told me, on the thoughts of a friend with a geography degree. Now, maybe that geography graduate's thoughts on the subject are absolutely correct. Maybe they're more reliable than decades of data collection and analysis by several generations of scientists who have made sea level rise their life's work. Maybe that councillor is correct to be sceptical, to question the science that underpins the visualizations and the national policies that decide what we can do here and now. But I know what I thought then and now. We can't rely on maybe. We need facts, not opinions. It's what led us to where we are here and now, and to View Climate Partnership organising a community jury, so that a representative sample of our fellow residents could understand the issues before making a stab at suggesting how our community should or could respond. Now, you might say the jury was only 34 people, and you'd be right. But as far as engagement processes go, this is by far the gold standard. It's the same as the UK Parliament has used in £500,000 processes to help the government make decisions on social care in 2018 and on climate change in 2020. So why did we use the same process in View? Because, as I hope I've made by now clear, this is a complicated subject that needs a sophisticated and nuanced understanding of all the issues at play. It's not the kind of subject that generates reliable recommendations, simply by stopping people in the street and asking their opinion. To ensure the process was independent of any bias, we set up an oversight panel, as you saw in the movie. We invited councillors, representatives of business, representatives of community groups, even someone from GCHQ, who's here tonight, and who we are only allowed to know as Jonathan. They made all the key decisions about how the jury would take place. And to ensure the process was representative, we went to great lengths to ensure the jury was a miniature copy of our community as a whole. It had the same spread of demographics, age, gender, ethnicity, home ownership, income, deprivation, disability, how long the person has lived in the area, and their attitude to climate change, as you find right across the community. Even if the jury had 10 times as many members, it's very unlikely the recommendations would be substantially different. So we can say with considerable confidence that they are representative of our community as a whole, provided everyone in our community had the chance to be given all the information, fully understand it, and deliberate, debate on all the nuances of the issues, which is something that you can't say about what you might read on Facebook, nor any other form of engagement or consultation. If you're interested, you can read about how the jury operated, how it first agreed a set of principles, then developed a set of recommendations. It's all in the jury's 108-page report, which is available on the jury's website. Now, I'm going to sit down soon. The jury will then present a selection of the most pertinent recommendations, grouped into 3 themes. It's a précis of the recommendations. The full recommendations are on those screens at the back of the room. These recommendations set a context for where we are now and how the jury believes we as a community should proceed. You'll find they're full of the common sense, wisdom, that exists in spades in our community, and I hope you'll find that they address your concerns about Bude's future, what we do next. After the jury present their recommendations, we'll hear from Rhys Hobbs, the Environmental Resilience and Adaptation Manager at Cornwall Council. We'll also hear briefly from his colleague, Julian Sharp, who's been running the Naked Space of the Sand project, and briefly from Justin Ridgewell, a flood and coastal risk specialist from the Environment Agency. They'll explain where we are now, and Rhys will explain what could happen next, made possible by the £3 million CTAP grant given to Bude. CTAP is a unique opportunity for our community. It puts us ahead of almost every other coastal community in Britain. Those other communities will also be grappling, to a greater or lesser extent than us, with how to respond to climate change and sea level rise. If they're not doing it now, they will be soon. But they don't take advantage of the funding we have in Bude. Within all this, Bude Climate Partnership's only agenda is to ensure that the community continues to have its say in a fully informed way that takes full account of all the community's needs and wants. As I said, opinions are cheap, facts are expensive. But the fact is, we can't afford to rely only on cheap opinions. We can't afford to have closed minds or to shoot the messenger because the message makes us feel uncomfortable. We have a responsibility to future generations not to close our minds to the possibilities and opportunities that lie ahead. We have a responsibility to our children and grandchildren to get this right. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. My name is Clive. I'm one of the jury members. I can shout. Yeah, that's really good. My name is Clive. I said I'm one of the jury members. Need to hold it a bit closer. I'd much prefer to shout. Before we give you some praising of our recommendations, the jury just wanted to say a few words about the jury process. The first thing to say is that we were all compliant, as you've heard, a group of individuals who live in Bude and the wider Bude area. We responded to a letter sent to all households inviting anyone to participate. We think that's quite important. The subsequent selection process brought together a diverse group of people who together have a huge range of life and professional experience. Jurors at differing levels of knowledge and acceptance of climate change. We met over 3 weekends when we were presented with a large amount of information and invited to develop a set of principles to address the issues put before us. We thought deeply and considered a wide range of options. At times, we were overwhelmed by the magnitude of the situation. The process enabled us to gain a lot more knowledge to an extent where, as a body, we could feel that we were able to make informed opinions. Through our combined knowledge and by adopting a collaborative approach, we worked through this complex issue together. We've identified a need for urgent action to achieve positive outcomes and hope for our community. We see long-term problems that can't be solved with short-term solutions. We wish to alert people to the gravity of the situation. We as a jury seek an ongoing commitment to continue to push for change and believe that if we can all work together, we can achieve this. People power is central to addressing this, but likewise, so is political action at all levels. We see opportunities to make a positive difference in Bude. The jury process has been completed. The production of the report containing the principles and recommendations brings an end to the jury's work. We represented the community and now want the community to get involved. The members of the jury here tonight are here as individuals wishing to lend our support to the actions we previously recommended, and we hope that you will join us. So we'll start off and I'll ask Sarah to kick us off with the first set of recommendations.
Thank you. Is that one? Yeah. The high
all the jury's recommendations is the principle of presenting change as an opportunity and a positive, not just a threat. By addressing these issues now in ways that engage the entire community and which set examples for all coastal communities, Bude is already getting the support and funding it needs to adapt to the changing climate. We mustn't squander this unique opportunity we have. The jury's foremost recommendation was that any response must prioritise natural processes. This includes using Cornwall Council's 2016 dune management plan to identify strategies for maintaining and improving dune structures at Summerlees. This is already starting through the dunes group of volunteers recently set up with Cornwall Wildlife Trust as part of the Making Space for Sand project. Recognising the impact of shoreline change on Bude's beach car parks, the jury recommended looking into future travel solutions for Crooklets and Summerlees whilst maintaining current car parking capacity. It also recommended research should be conducted into how building sea defences could protect the shoreline. Right, I'll pass on to Sean, who's going to talk about community.
Hi, I'm Sean. I was also a jury member of the Bude Climate Jury. I'm going to read out an overview of the jury's response to the needs of community engagement when responding to sea level rise. To ensure the direct involvement of local residents and businesses when decisions are made about Bude's changing shoreline, the jury stressed the need for meaningful involvement of the entire community, ranging from simple consultation to a more active co-design approach, but to always take account of local knowledge and to help build upon scientific evidence base. The principles and recommendations emphasise that it needs to consult and engage widely, including with young people, to make sure that those most affected are directly engaged in the consultations. The jury recommended that a change network of local organisations such as the RNLI, the Surf Lifesaving Club, sports clubs, community associations and schools should be organised to speak with one voice on how Bude should respond to climate change and to encourage to action those with power to protect our shoreline in ways that best meet the needs of the whole community. The jury's recommendations call for a comprehensive, wider community engagement exercise to be conducted, funded by part of the CTAP award for Bude. They also encourage the community involvement in forming the Neighbourhood Development Plan, the NPD, to incorporate coastal change management areas, CCMA, and its plans across the wider Bude area. Finally, the jury asked for all engagements to be transparent and all progress to be regularly reported back to community at meetings such as this, and those funded by local government. Thank you. I'm going to hand now to Clive, who's got something else to say.
Thank you. Yes, this is the last three groups of recommendations relate to local awareness and responding to sea level rise. And threaded through the jury's recommendations are several key principles that address local interests. First of all, that all work carried out needs to consider the impact of future generations. That it needs to be completed to a high standard which is sustainable and doesn't negatively impact the character of an area, including its tourism-dependent economy. That the importance of tourism in our area is recognised and that we build a reputation with tourists for being an environmentally friendly UK holiday destination. That any response uses local workforce where possible. That any response embraces our community's willingness to help, providing recognition and upskilling opportunities to volunteers whilst protecting existing community initiatives. Unfurled. That a communications campaign by Bude-Stratton and Cornwall councils across the whole wider Bude area spreads awareness of any actions and plans to address sea level rise through a range of channels in a positive and constructive manner. That campaign should be highly visual, including a permanent exhibition at the castle, notice boards at high-risk areas, large signs and posters at prominent places where people gather to chat. And that campaigns prioritise human stories and visual images to raise awareness of youth responses to changing climate in a relatable fashion. Finally, the jury also recommended creating a network of coastal towns facing similar issues to share knowledge and experience, initially across Cornwall, but ultimately further afield. This is already being followed up in collaboration with the Environment Agency and an organisation called Time and Tide Bell. So that completes our Tracy introduction, and to reiterate, remind you what Rob said, the details of the proposals are set out on the boards around the room, if you can move around and see them. So, thank you very much.
Response. Nice. Come forward.
Yeah. Hi everybody, you can hear me at the back, essentially. I'm Chris Holtz, I'm the Environmental Resilience and Adaptation Manager for Cornwall Council. I've got Jonathan Sharp, the Makespace project lead, and also Justin Griffith from the Environment Agency in the year. We're going to run you through a few slides following on from the jury's recommendations, some in relation to, and Justin's going to outline the national strategy and a little bit about the shoreline management plan, which Rob has done a really good job of articulating earlier. I'm then going to intro a little bit in terms of two of the projects that are off the back of some of that national strategy and the policies that are part of that and what that means for viewed. John's going to talk about his project in a little bit more detail. But essentially, we're going to cover what we are assisting with in relation to as officers for implementing those different bits of policy around the coastline in Cornwall in general. So my remit is protection erosion across the whole of the Cornish coastline. But we're obviously going to cover what happening in you specifically. So Justin, I'm going to hand over to you first instance, if that's all right, and then I'll come back.
So yeah, I am just going to outline a little bit around the national policy context and say a little bit about the national flood and coastal erosion risk management strategy, because as Rob said, yeah, that really sets the context whenever we're thinking about how we respond to climate change and sea level rise, wherever we are in the country. So this is just a sort of a recap really on the sort of the terms of reference, if you like, that set the scene for how we work and how we respond to the types of risks that Rob has outlined. And I'm then going to have a quick look at the shoreline management plan as well, but I think Rob's done a good job on letting me keep that nice and short. So the national policy context is set at government level by DEFRA's flood and coastal erosion risk management policy statement. And that just sets out the wider ambition, which sets the framework for our strategy. And it's all about creating a nation more resilient to climate change and to flood and coastal erosion risk. And an important sort of set of policies alongside that national, the DEFRA policy statement are the planning policies that are set out in the National Planning Policy Guidance and the National Planning Policy Framework. And importantly, they describe how we should be working at the coast and how we should be taking a long-term view, using adaptive management approaches, working with natural processes, and importantly, engaging participatory planning as part of our process. And that means involving everybody, but obviously particularly the communities and key stakeholders who are affected by change. And at the bottom there, coastal change management areas that we've already been hearing about is part of, is one of the recommendations from the jury. So this is distilled down into the Environment Agency's national strategy. The key principles are around setting a broad framework for delivering sustainable management of the risk at the coast. And that's the key thing here. It's all about sustainability in terms of technical sustainability, environmental sustainability, and economic sustainability. And the strategy focus is very much on long-term adaptation and building resilience, as opposed to what we've done in the past and historically, which is protection. So it encourages all growth to be sustainable. It's not against growth. It's about encouraging sustainable growth at the coast, but it wants that growth to be resilient to future climate change. And it is prioritizing citizen involvement. And it's really strong on advocating that communities, stakeholders, citizens need to be part of the decision-making process. So the shoreline management plans, as Rob said, shoreline management plans, SMPs, they cover the whole country. There are 22 in total, 20 that cover the English coastline, 2 that cover the Welsh coastline. The current shoreline management plan that we have in place was adopted in 2011, as Rob said, and it just sets out a clear direction of travel in order for us to get to a more sustainable position in the future in terms of managing risk and shoreline position. And it does this by setting out policies over 3 time frames: short term, which is 20 years, medium term, which is the next 30 years, and then the long term, which is the 50 years after that. And these plans are, it's really important, these plans are mutually owned plans. They are developed in collaboration with the Environment Agency, but the local authorities are very much involved, as are many other stakeholders and landowners and other coastal partners. We have the next one, next view. So the Cornwall and Isles of Scilly SMP sets out the management intent for Bude, and we have certainly go up the steps. There are 3 key policy units that are described in the shoreline management plan for the Bude frontage. One covers the area of the breakwater, round past the lock gates and round the front of the castle. We've then got the policy which covers the Summerlees frontage, Seapool, Middle Beach, and then we've got one that covers Crooklets. The policies for the approach for Summerlees and Crooklets is the managed realignment approach. It's recognising that we need to adapt. We need to manage the risk from sea level rise by absorbing the additional wave energy that sea level rise will bring. But this policy unit here, which includes the breakwater and the lock gates and so forth, as Rob described, that has a hold the line policy because the breakwater is an important control point. It's also obviously got the heritage value as does the frontage alongside the canal and around the lock gates. But they're also sort of key control points in terms of managing the risk, so they continue to be held. So it's just important to understand that that is how the shoreline management plan describes the management intent for the viewed frontage. And for Crooklets and Summerlees, it is all about a more natural approach, improving and making the view systems more resilient where we can, and just allowing natural processes to occur. But the change is managed. That's the important thing to understand. And of course, the management approach in both of those locations is being sort of further investigated and informed by the Making Space for Sound project, which Julian is going to talk to us about. So the next one, please. And so this is just a quick revisit to the visualizations, which I know some of you have seen, Rob described. But it's just to remind all of us that this is about responding to a problem which is being informed by data, survey, and that understanding of how sea level rise is going to impact the frontage. So this is about co-owning that risk and sort of co-designing a response to it. The next slide, please. And this is the same set of visualizations with the mean high water stream water levels projected across them. But I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to hand back to Reece.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. I think that was useful and important just to set out some of the national policy and the strategy in terms of the bits that we're now going to talk about are, as government officers, that we are working to try and implement those and do that in the best way possible, working with the community to help to get them to shape how that looks, essentially. I'm just going to outline what's going on in relation to the Making Space project, which John is going to cover, but also then CTAP. I think the thing I'd like to sort of stress from a jury perspective is to thank them, because as you will see in a minute, many of the recommendations that they have put forward are things that we are taking forward either through the Making Space for Sand project or through the CTAP project. So in that way, we are doing exactly what the jury set out to do in terms of that is informing the future direction of how things may look. But that's not to say that we won't be doing that with the rest of the community as well as part of the projects, essentially. But in terms of the different projects, so this is a fund that's been made, the Coastal Innovation Programme has been made available by DEFRA through the Environment Agency. It's mostly, but not all, being delivered by local authorities, so Cornwall Council, others in Devon, elsewhere in the country as well. Storage Making Space for Sand project sits in the £150 million flooding coastal resilience innovation. Lots of acronyms. Essentially, that is looking at using natural processes to make locations more resilient from a flooding perspective. The Coastal Transition Accelerator Programme, actually named CTAP, is looking at making locations that are at risk of coastal erosion more resilient. So Bude has a project that is covered by both of those. The real difference, though, is Dolly's project is £6 million across the whole of Cornwall. 40 different sites. So that 6 million doesn't go very far once you've started to engage with the community and think about actually practically doing anything, which is why the 3 million, because of the work the jury have done, and also because of the risks that Bude faces in relation to coastal erosion and the impacts of the dunes, and the risk that that faces to the town, that's why the 3 million has been made available for Bude, essentially. There are others within the programme in the 36 million. They're on the Norfolk coast and East Riding, Yorkshire. Some of those are already seeing properties falling into the sea. We're not in that situation, but the 3 million has been made available to Bude because of the level of risk and the opportunity for us to get out in front of it and to better plan for it, essentially. So I'm going to hand over to Jolly just briefly to talk about Make Space, Sam, and then I'll cover the CTAP project in a bit more detail. Oh, sorry.
So, yeah, my name is Johnny Sharp. I'm the project lead on the Making Space for Sand. So the full title of the project is Building Coastal Resilience and Dynamic Coast by Making Space for Sand. That's what we call an acronym, so we just shorthand call it Making Space for Sand. And as Reece has indicated, it's part of the Building Coastal Resilience Innovation Programme. So, Reece, next one. I've only got 2 or 3, be very quick. So, this visual is just giving an indication as to the kind of breadth, direction of all of the different projects. Some of them are coastal, some of them are about flood risk, some of them are about sustainable drainage. There's a whole cross section of different projects. We are one of those 25. The Making Space for Sand project is the areas that are up on the screen. The project is about collecting data, better understanding coastal processes. It's about understanding the health and integrity of the dune systems we do have, some of which are very healthy, some of them are not. The final part of the project is about the community that are surrounding those beaches, are part of those beaches, and understanding how they want to adapt to a changing climate. So we're engaging with communities, and where we can, as Reece indicated, very little funding, we're looking to deliver some adaptation intervention. So who is the project and where is it? Well, the project is led by Cornwall Council, but it's being delivered by a number of partners. So South West Coastal Monitoring, University of Plymouth are collecting lots of data, using their expertise and knowledge to model coastal change so we can better understand what the coastline will look like in the future. I think people like to criticise models. There's no such thing as a perfect model when it comes to coastal change, but what we want to create is something that's better than what we have. So we'll better understand, looking at sediment offshore, how it's moving onshore, how it's behaving when it's onshore and rolling back onto the coastline, blowing up the beach. And also importantly, how thick the sand is. It doesn't sound like it's a very important thing to know, but if you've got meters, several meters of sand, you're going to be more resilient than if you don't. So we're collecting all of that data, and by the end of the project in 2027, we'll understand a lot more about how soft coastlines behave. Working in Cornwall Wildlife Trust, we're collecting a huge amount of data and have very shortly publishing it on the state of the dunes. They've surveyed over 23 of the dune systems, and in some instances, in the case of Somleys and Wigmouth, we've been able to use historical survey data collected in 2006 to be able to show how they have changed in that short period of time. And finally, we're working with Cornwall Community Flood Forum to help with engagement. They've got a huge amount of experience with engaging with communities about flood risk, and they're employing that skill set to engage coastal communities about what challenges there are in the future. This next slide. So what are outputs in Bude? Well, we're looking at doing some things now because we can, and those things are data. First of all, we're collecting lots of data around to see bathymetry surveys to look at how sediments behaving out there. We've carried out some surveys, some seismic surveys to see how deep the sand is on some of these, how deep it is on crooklets. We've got a weather station on the RNLI lifeboat building, which is telling us how windy and wet it is. Why is that important? Well, if you've got very wet sand, it doesn't move. And if it's not very windy, the sand doesn't move either. So that data can tell us how sand is going to behave under certain conditions. So we're collecting that data and we're going to provide more detailed models. You've got a great model already, but we're going to provide an even more detailed model so we can better understand what change will look like. We've introduced a couple of coastguard stations. It's a bit of a community science program. You may have noticed one on Summerlees, one on Crooklets. I know that you've noticed it because I can tell you right now that the one on Summerlees is the most popular one that's being used in Cornwall. So people are using it, but that's giving the community the ability to very simply use their phones and collect data whenever they're walking their dog or walking along the downs, collect data of how that coastline is changing. So right now we're collecting all sorts of images, most of them on coastline, not all of them frustrating, some of them are a little bit inappropriate, but we're getting the coastline in there, and that will then be used by scientists who will then interpret those changes. Another thing that actually came out of the climate jury was they want to, you've got lots of dune routes throughout the county. With the task force just down the road, these great work in the dunes. You've got the Friends of Par Beach, Friends of Fiscal Dunes. There was a call out we want to have a group in dunes to be more proactively involved in the dune. We're working with colleagues in Cornwall Wildlife Trust to help facilitate that. So I think it's really important to indicate that we were doing some elements of work before the climate jury were deliberating, but actually there are outputs that will come out of that as well, such as the dune group work on interpretation. We want to be doing that with input from this new dune group and with the climate jury. There is the potential as well through the project to help support some smaller scale adaptation in Bude as well. However, I think Reece articulated my challenge in that I'm a £6 million project. Sounds like an awful lot of money, but when you divide that by 5 or 6 years and by 40 locations, it doesn't equate to a great deal. So my ability to deliver an awful lot in Bude is a little bit constrained because of that, which is why I think we're fortunate in many ways to have the opportunities presented through CTAP. So that's my presentation, very short, very sweet, and I'll hand over to Reece now to provide a little bit more detail about CTAP. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Yeah, so I'm going to move on to the snappy acronym CTAP, the Coastal Transition Accelerator Programme. I've talked briefly about what the outline of the programme across the country is, but now I'm going to give you some more detail about what it could look like for Bude, and I think I would stress the could look like element in that. So essentially, as a flood and coastal risk manager or an environmental risk manager, I'm already seeing the impacts of increased storminess and sea level rise on council assets, on areas around the coast across the whole of Cornwall. Probably everybody in the room will likely recognise the sand rails and the walkway area that I've shown there. There is a level of deterioration that is increasing in that area as a result of some of the effects that we're seeing of those increased storminess. Why I'm showing you this though is that the CTAP project is providing the opportunity as part of the adaptation work that it's doing to improve and restore some of that in some ways and improve the accessibility for the area around in terms of people getting to and from the beach, essentially. We've then got the car park with public conveniences and the RNLI building in front of it. With the RNLI building being where it is and the public conveniences, the dune is constrained. It can't roll back naturally like it wants to, so it's building up. It's already affecting the RNLI's ability to deploy in that area. It's challenging for them, which affects things like the response times, puts additional people at risk when they're out and they can't get there quickly enough. And ultimately, it's an important thing for Bude in terms of the service it provides and the people that it saves, essentially. So we want to make sure that that can continue to operate either temporarily or in the longer term in a way that still performs its function, right? So it's about planning for that now and working with people like the RNLI to be able to enable that to happen. We are already losing car parking spaces on some of these, essentially. So roughly about 60 have probably been lost overall in relation to the way that the dune is encroaching. So we are seeing those impacts already. Now, some of the things that may come back as a result of that is, oh, but the council are doing what they used to in terms of maintaining it. There is an element of that. The council doesn't have the funds to be able to maintain and do things in the way that they did previously. And that's a fact. But also, the rate of change of some of this means that in the longer term, it's going to become a fruitless task to try and continue to do that, to be able to stop it from effectively overtaking the car park. Now, the point of CTAP is to allow us to be able to plan for that now and get out ahead of it in terms of what can we do as alternatives, and what can we do in the temporary period around those alternatives as well. The final one, things like the other parts of the RNI, so you've got the lookout station there and the Southwest Coastal Path. There are areas at risk of that coastal erosion within that area. It's very close to the Southwest Coast Path in some locations. So do we want to look at future in terms of potentially setting some of that coastal path further back, for example? There's a few examples there. And also with crooklets, we have the defences in front of the area at the moment. Over time, we know that they will begin to deteriorate, not as quickly as the rate change of some of these, but there will be changes essentially. So how do we plan for that now, essentially? So that's just a few examples, but I wanted to touch on the storm tower because the concept of CTAP and adaptation and rolling assets back where we can or moving things out of areas at risk shouldn't be an alien concept to most people in the room. If you look out to the storm tower, you can see that that's the second time it's been moved to accommodate the eroding coastline that's there. So the principles of what CTAP is doing or looking to do, work with the community to do in terms of preparing for those changes, we've already done that here. So it's, okay, no, I haven't done it. That's not true. I don't mean, I mean, it has already been done for the town, essentially, through a lot of money that was raised locally. So CTAP is, it's those adaptation actions. It's what can we do to prepare for it now, where the coastline is eroded. It's allowing the assets to roll back, still maintaining those community infrastructure points. How do you transition that land use? Can you use the land that you're effectively moving away from temporarily in a way that still benefits the town? How do you finance that? How does it work with local businesses who may be affected? How does it work with people like the RNLI who may be affected? And then, you know, involvement with the jury and others in terms of the business and kind of third sector, in terms of finding a way of getting input from the town, essentially. Right, so try and dispel a few bits. What it won't fund, it's not going to fund new defences. So it will not fund a seawall to be put in view. That does not mean that we won't be continuing as part of the shoreline management plan policy to maintain the breakwater. But it's not going to build a new defence in front of some of these or in front of part of the £3 million. And just a bit of context there as well. I've seen some information around people thinking that for the £3 million that they could spend, they could do that. I can tell you, you can't in today's world. The new flood defence scheme spent £3 million, nearly 4, getting to a business case scenario. And the cost of that scheme is looking near 200 million. So I just wanted to point that out because it's not something that is feasible. It can fund things that are to do with coastal flooding, but what it can do is establishing the dune network will help to reduce flood risk in the town. So that is an added benefit from the work that the rollback will allow. It can work in areas of hold the line policy. So as I've said, it can be used to maintain or fix the breakwater, and it can be used to maintain or fix the defences that are currently at crooklets. And in the same way, it can be used to do as usual activities. So as I've said, the things that the council used to do previously, it can be used to fund those and also can be used to do maintenance activities that the council would normally have historically potentially provided. It's not available to be used for storm damage, so if we have damage to areas, it can't be used to repair things. And it also, unfortunately, can't be used for coastal cleanup in relation to where you have things that are on the beach, rubbish, plastics, or other things that happen as a result of storm damage. That was quite, I just wanted to put those out there because I know we talk about the things that it can do, essentially. So, for you, we need to plan that change. We know broadly from the shoreline management plan what the possibilities and what the intentions are there in terms of allowing some of the dune to roll back into the car park. And that is already happening, as I've said. But we need to plan that for some of these for projects in an organised way out to the next 100 years, essentially. And you can do that through the designation in the neighbourhood development plan of coastal change management area. But in order to designate a coastal change management area, you need the plan so that we know when you have things like defences that start to fail, you have trigger points around what we're doing instead. So it's not a case of, oh, that's fallen down, we're going to leave it. It's, oh, that's falling down, we will do this instead. The jury recommended transport an accessibility study, or to look at it in terms of from that perspective. That's something that the project is going to take forward. And I've already talked about the walkway at the canal area. One of the improvements that CTAP can offer there is around improving that to the point where it is more mobility access friendly. Currently, there's no way of accessing some of these beaches easily if you are in a wheelchair or a pushchair or have other mobility impairments, essentially. So by improving that, you can get people in and around the area to the beach better. There's temporary solutions as well. Working with the RLI, as I said, it's already impacting how they operate. What can we do to help that continue in the short term, as well as in the longer term, as they work with us and others to try and plan about what the long-term future for the lifeboat station is, essentially. And then finally, we work with the community. We've already taken on board the jury's recommendations and tried to weave them into the CTAP project where we can, but we want to continue that in some form with the jury, but also with the large number of people that turned up this evening. So that coastal change management plan development is an opportunity for everyone to get involved and have their say on how that looks. And then the coastal change management area is consulted on as a process through Bude-Stratton Council, essentially. So it's not the only opportunity for you to input, but there are plenty of those, and we'll be trying to facilitate that. Now the potentials. Relocating some of those public services to alternative locations. So toilet block could move further back into the car park. I'm not saying it will do, but leaving it where it is at the moment, we know is an unsustainable position. The same goes for potentially the R&I facilities in some way. I've said that that needs to be a staged process. How do we do that? We need to work with them to try and work out how that can happen. Our design, how do we, if we do certain things that are temporary, allow them to be moved? Can it be that as the dune starts to move back more, we pick them up, move them in a relatively simple way, so they're not fixed assets? One of the things that the gig club, rowing club had to look at as part of what was installed there, so that can be moved simply if it needs to be at a future point. And decommissioning parts of the car park that are at risk or have currently been taken over by the dune network, but it's not doing that in a way that just loses the car parking spaces. We need to look at other alternatives, and none of these have been settled, but you need to look at potentially the option of more formalising the Crippets Overflow car park. I'm not saying you would tarmac it, but you can make it more resilient for more frequent use. The more, I guess,
extreme version of that would be looking at the suitability of a park and ride scheme. Now, I got pretty much the reaction I would expect, but when you are considering the options of what you need to do to manage this, you need to consider all of those, even if it's something that doesn't get taken forward. Because if not, you're settling on an idea that that may or may not work. If we're considering all of them, we can at least say we've ruled some of them out for various reasons or not. And with the reaction I got from the park and ride scheme, that does happen elsewhere in Cornwall in quite a few locations. And it is something that people still use. So I'm not saying that that is what's happening, but it is an adaptation. So I've talked about the improved accessibility overall on the coast. If you end up with a situation where you're moving people around and you're losing car parking spaces, you need to plan that, I think is what I'm trying to say. The timelines. So Environment Agency put forward the initial findings for the project to DEFRA last summer. The Minister announced it in October. We've been using the last couple of months to develop the project plan, and then are beginning to develop the outline business case, which will set out broadly what the project will do as part of its deliverables. But that is also to be informed by the engagement with the community as to what the community want that to look like, and through the development of the coastal change management plan. So with the other thing I need to say about that is the back end of the programme, we will look to deliver some of those practical interventions, but they have to be delivered by March 2027, essentially. That's when the funding is for. So just in summary, the primarily focused on coastal erosion and the impacts to the dunes, and also coastal erosion in relation to the defences of crooklets. But it is an opportunity. Nobody else is getting 3 million to plan this up front at the moment. As I said, East Riding and North Norfolk are already losing houses into the city. Some of those actions that it's going to deliver are planning based, but some are practical. It will change things potentially. And we need to deliver it by March 2027. And the final thing I just want to say, underlining what Rob has said and what the jury have already been done in a really great way, is the continuum of the engagement in relation to developing those plans and how that evolves is the most important thing. And it runs right through from strategy all the way to what we hope to carry out locally. So that's going to be done. I think hopefully that's given you a bit more of an informed background in terms of what the projects that are already delivering are and what the potential is.
Thank you. We'll move on. Public participation now. It's a requirement of this council that I give people the opportunity to ask questions about the parish. Balance of probability, you're all going to want to talk about this. So I'm going to probably get a hand grenade in the middle. Has anybody got anything not related to this? I think we need to go down. So I'm thinking maybe go out there with the mic.
Oh, yeah, no, that's not sure.
Otherwise, I'm really sort of going to do top, so take a lot out. Yes. Yeah, so we're going to start with county councillors, then we'll throw it out.
Ladies and gentlemen, is that sound good? When I was 3 years old, I got lost at the Moorcombe Shark, didn't I? The truth was I wandered away from my poor brother. And I ended up being taken to one of the stewards' tents, and the steward asked me who I was. And I said, I'm Kevin Colwell, 4 Linston Cottages, Bude, Cornwall. And that's who I was when I was 3. And that's who I still am today. I can't use those famous 5 words that we often hear in conversations when I moved to Cornwall. Because I never moved, I was always here. People talk about complex identity. I've got a very, very simple identity. I'm a babe from Bude. So this stuff matters to me. This isn't some sort of academic case study for me. This isn't escape to the country. I can move to this place or I can move to some other place. This is my home. And this stuff is not, I'm not able to deal dispassionately with this because it is literally too close to home. So don't expect facts and figures from me. The Cornish people can get very cynical. And I think that's the defence mechanism. Years ago, I was told the air in Cornwall does something to you. It sort of makes you chill down. And it also blunts your elbows. And people coming down the A30, the A39, they don't have that disadvantage. They have a little bit more money than us, usually, and a little bit more education than us, often, and a little bit better connections than us, and a little bit better knowledge of the system and how to move through that system and how to make it work for them. And before you know it, they're up the top of the ladder and they're looking down at us and they're telling us what to do and what to think. But this is not that. Let's be very clear what this is. This is a group of people representative of our community who have come together and heard some very difficult and very challenging facts. And they've come up with measured and appropriate responses. Now you may say, garbage in, garbage out. They have come up with these responses because they have been given bogus information. They've been given lies. They have been somehow corrupted by the wokes and the greens and everybody else. But these are facts that are accepted across the country. They are facts given by the Environment Agency, by leading experts. And they don't have to be categorically right. No, I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert in science. I'm not an expert in oceanography. I can't tell you that the sea level is going to rise a certain amount. I can't tell you. Well, I'm an expert in one thing. I'm an expert in moral cowardice. My wife had symptoms of cancer. And she said to me, I'm okay. I know what this is. I've had this before. It's not life-threatening. It's not cancer. And it was convenient for me to believe that. I knew there was a risk, but it was convenient for me to believe that. And when she got worse, it was COVID times. And it was convenient for me to use COVID as an excuse not to take her to the doctor, not to take her to the hospital. It was a convenient excuse for me to do nothing. And then I couldn't use that excuse anymore. It was obvious she had to go to the doctor. And she was in hospital 25 hours before she died. And she died without hearing the cancer diagnosis. Died without that certainty. So I can't offer you certainty of these sea level rises. I can't do that. Nobody can do that. They could be not so bad, they could be worse. But if you think even for a minute that there's a chance, just a chance, that these predictions are right, and there's a chance, just a chance, that the recommendations of the Bude Climate Jury will help make this town more resilient, then we have to endorse the recommendations of the Bude Climate Jury. Thank you.
I'm not saying the DFL, I'm down from London, but I've been in Westminster for many years. And I have seen government agencies presenting things to us before. Some of them been right, some of them been wrong. The only question I've got is, if one accepts this, and I guess broadly speaking we do, is are the decisions going to be, if you like all going with the flow? Are we going to be adapting as we go along, or are there going to be decisions that are made in anticipation of events? If you see what I mean. But obviously, constant monitoring is going to be required. So when we get round to actually dealing with this, are we going to be sort of in a period of constant response? Or are we going to make a once-off decision and then sit back for another 50 years and wait until something else happens? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yes.
Can I really respond to that?
Yes, we don't basically respond.
Well, yes, the former of your scenario, not the latter. Not like a huge investment and then sit back for 50 years and see what happens and hope that everything that we're projecting now is exactly right. It's more about an incremental approach and an incremental adaptation over time. And that's the principle. We call them adaptation pathways because it's a pathway. It's not putting all your eggs in one basket in year one and then hoping that you've made the right investment and you've made the right interventions that are going to take you through to year 100. So it's an incremental process.
I think just to add on to that, in the coastal change management plan perspective, that will set out, as mentioned, those trigger points in terms of when things change. If they change, they might not change in the timelines that we expect them to. So it may be that you have to revisit it in terms of, do we still need that? Does it happen the way that we thought it would? Those predictions are predictions. They're not certainties, essentially. And by having the coastal change management plan and the coastal change management area in the neighbourhood development plan, that is refreshed every X number of years to come on the tape. So there is the opportunity to keep up and revise that. It's not, this is what's happening and we're wedded to that for 100-year period.
Well, it's a really good question.
I've got a very loud voice, but I think I'm finding it rather controversial, some comments. One that really interests me is, I think, well, proposals that Amy mentioned it, that while we are looking at improving car parking, and let's be honest, everybody here knows that we need far more into, not just we are going to maintain what we have. Well, I'm sorry, but we are not maintaining it. There's a science couple where the trust are and we've not to look at it. And to say that the council cannot afford to clear it seems rather ludicrous when they're losing thousands of pounds on the car parking spaces that are covered. The cost of clearing it is going to be more than covered by the car parking. We're all paying more council tax, and what are we paying for? So that's that to come off the car park. Now, I know we've got to take all this into consideration, but what worries me is the businesses in between. The surf schools that run from there, the deliveries to Life's a Beach. Yes, the RNLI is close to my heart, and I'm very pleased to say that the RNLI never many times than people with far more experience than me. But we have struggled to launch that lifeboat. The lifeguards struggle to get in the beach. And it's great to say you want to assist, but it isn't happening. In practical terms, it is not happening. That dam is not being cleared. As far as a disabled beach, and if you look on any disabled website, you will see someone's car park and somebody's beach is advertised as disabled. There are 2 beach huts built for disabled people and have a disabled wheelchair. You cannot get them on the beach because that is not cleared. You confronted with very disgruntled people because they cannot access that bit.
Former council car park, so on the back, this is on the former council screen. It's a Cornwall Council car park, so I'm going to bat it to a Cornwall councillor. I think there's two in the room, would any of them like to volunteer? Well done, councillor LeBroy.
Well, thank you for that. Can everybody hear me? I know there's been a bit of difficulty at the back. I'm not sure we can answer that question because it needs the support of the environment agency guys and methodology that they're proposing stuff. But what I will do is go off on a bit of a tangent now that I have got the microphone in my hand because I've prepared quite a long speech, and in light of what Rob Ewing has presented, the environment agency guys have presented, I'm going to modify quite a lot to speak from my heart instead. The first thing I want to say is I do question science and I do have opinions. And Rob told me we weren't allowed to have that tonight. And I think it's probably quite important that we should all have inquiry minds, especially when decisions of this nature are being presented to us, which will have a massive impact on us. Now, I really think when it comes to assets like somebody's car park, which is central to the way that Bude works, we need to think very, very carefully about how we manage that. I absolutely agree with the science. We can see the effects of climate change already. We know already that Bude will be susceptible, and to think about this at this point in time is exactly the right thing to be doing. But what I'm concerned about is the sand dune enough? Do we need more than that? When I think about the sand dune at some of these, and again, I'm sorry, Rob, this isn't opinion, but when I observe it and think about it, that sand dune is on the highest level of the car park. The car park dips down inland towards Stanley Walls Bridge and where the rear pumping station is. And if we had an inundation from the sea, I sort of think that the water is going to get us round the back rather than from the front. So I think that there does need to be more thought into this, and certainly increasing the resilience by increasing the size of the sand dune, I have no problem with it. Challenge the environment agency guys on this very strongly. They know that I've had arguments with them probably over a couple of years about what my thoughts are, but I am convinced that it will make a difference. But I'm also convinced that we need to think about more than just that. We need to think about the other stakeholders, such as the businesses, and I can see some people here that represent businesses in that area tonight. I think they need to be given every opportunity to bring what they feel about their area forward. And again, when I think about Bude and the way it is in the summertime and the traffic circulating around Bude, well, it doesn't. It all clogs up, even now. If you have less car parking spaces on Sundays, well, what's going to happen? Those are the questions that we need to be thinking about and making sure we've got an answer for now. And I think that there's more work to be done on this. Car parking spaces, yes. I don't know.
Thank you so much. I agree with Peter in lots of respects, of course, as always. In the old days, of course, the farmers came down and cleared the sand off the car park free of charge, at no cost. People say the sand is polluted, but that's rubbish because we walk on it, sit on it, and play on it. So the sand is not polluted. So if they wanted to get rid of the sand, they could do quite easy. However, my main point is, if we go back a few thousand years, where are the sand dunes in Bude? The golf course. Because the sand, the sea came in a different format. The river flooded all the way to the valley. Roman remains up in Walesburg, the head of the river valley. So there are historical precedents already set. Now, this river valley itself could flood quite dramatically with global warming. I am in agreement now. Obviously, is global warming occurring? You know, increased storms and whatever have you. I remember as a schoolboy in here, where the water is halfway up the wall here, because the valley flooded. That was obviously flood alleviation was a problem. But all I'm saying is, historically, the sand seems to be building up in a different part, and keeping the sand dunes on on some of these beaches, to me, is a joke. You get a good storm and it'll take it right out. And I agree with Peter, the levels haven't been thought about either, so there are lots to be discussed. And even though I'm a great fan of, it's a reality that global warming is occurring. I think what I'd like to see in the triangle is a column saying how much it's rised every year, and put a year there, and then people will realise it is rising. There's nothing visual at the moment to say it's rising. People who live in the Scilly Isles don't get on it, it isn't at all, So it's rising in some places, but at the same time, as we know with plate tectonics, the Earth is moving up and down in different places in the world. Thank you.
UK 100. They were net zero 10 years earlier than that. Money has been poured in to make sure that that can happen, obviously. But where is that money coming from? And I think you'll find that some places that money is coming from is not what we want to hear. So I would suggest that Cornwall County people go back and find out where the money comes from, why it's needed, whether the sea rises or not. If everybody's got different opinions. In 1980 to 70s, it's all going right. So, where are we? But I think money, where is the money coming from?
No idea.
Right. But you are
I'm the mayor of Bude-Stratton, and we aren't funding any of this. So the gentleman over there tells you a lot about the money. It's our budget wouldn't cover this, I can assure you. Where is the money?
I mean,
you did go through it.
Yeah. In terms of the money that is coming in relation to basic sand and CTAM, it's coming from UK government. So definitely, it's not coming from UK 100. It's coming directly from the UK government through the Environment Agency. Your question, I think, was around the net zero work. I don't have the answers to that question.
Today, I believe, it is.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Martin Knight. I'm a teacher at Bude-Stratton. I've taught there for the last 18 years. I'm going to represent the youth of our community. Teacher, I also run the Bude-Stratton. So we moved from Crooklets back over to Sunleys because as the club develops and you work out the logistics of the young students and services we have, that the town is much safer for our young service to be based out of Sunleys car park. About every, if we think alternating Fridays, we moved always from Crooklets over to Sunleys because we have to utilise that height mode. It's a safe and nurturing environment for our young service. So to walk from Crooklets to Sunleys if that car park doesn't exist, it becomes a catastrophic nightmare for us to club around safely. We average 90 children every Friday at our club. We are the biggest club in the whole country. And that is because it's testament to the community, volunteering 20 to 30 lifeguards every Friday at their own time. So we now have more national champions in our town because of the way our community is serviced. There's an amazing work being done with the skate park, it's another asset. What I want to say though is Cyril, my colleague here from Big Blue, BSX, they're running business in that park. Cyril's also launching AdServe, which is a community disabled access. And it's going to be the cornish hub of that. We are so far ahead in surfing in our town for the whole of the community, as well as what we are providing people by taking that car park. Park and ride will not work for us. You cannot get on a bus with an 8-foot circle with all of the children. We're bringing all the things down the need, even leaving half the family right. Can't just get down there anyway, reducing the car. I live in Westwood. Many of our streets aren't permitted. We live in the road where we live with our families in our community. It's only going to knock that car park to then fill our communities over there with people parking on our streets. And we are going to park in front of our own houses and be able to live our lives, which we do, and contribute to our communities. So I do feel that that car park has to be protected in a way that is manageable to run the businesses that we run and support our community and youth.
When the climate jury landed on this recommendation, what other options were they presented with?
Did it make it? That's a total myth.
The making way for sound recommendation.
Yeah, that's.
That was not the dunes, not the car park.
It's not the jury.
The dunes are going to move across the car park.
That's the scene.
That is one scientific projection.
Okay, my question was, were you presented with any other options, like the gentleman back there just said, to preserve the car park?
What we were
By
presented
stopping
with
the scene, no, or was this the only option you were presented with?
Mike, just read the
It's a
recommendation.
simple question.
Okay. Sorry, just read the recommendation. The recommendation is that we need to look at how we maintain the same parking capacity while also being able to think about what we do about the dunes.
I understand the recommendation. My question is, were you presented with any other options?
There weren't any options presented.
Thank you. Okay.
Can I?
That answers the
can't-
question.
Can I comment something as a juror? Can I just make a comment?
Can?
As the jury, we were presented with. We were presented with the projection that the car park was going to be lost. We weren't given any obvious way of saving the car park. You will see, we talked a lot about parking, I think, like we showed you over those 5 days. And we made it very clear, we wanted all the businesses concerned to be involved in discussing alternative parking solutions. It's not our intention to close the car park and force everyone to Brooklyn's. We are trying to find alternative ways, whether that's moving the car park or whatever. That is something the community as a whole needs to decide. Thank you.
You reckon you stand doing what it's doing now? You're already losing the car park.
Fair point, but please don't start.
What the making way to sound.
No, my question was quite a simple one. How many options were you presented with?
But that's not the jury's decision, that you're conflating what making way to sound.
I'm asking the question. I think we've got to read.
So I guess I'll just reiterate what I said in the presentation. We haven't decided that we're losing all of the car park or it's being removed. It is being impacted by the processes of the Duke movement. Totally agree with the point that you've made in relation to the businesses and how we plan for that. That's why I'm saying remove the entire of the car park. We need to make sure that as part of that process in terms of how we plan for loss of car parking space, that is better managed across the country.
Street parking epidemic.
Please let him finish, okay? The only way we're going to have to communicate fairly. Nobody interrupted you, sir. Please let him finish.
So all of the points that are being raised are the right ones. The ones that we want to hear as part of what the CTAP project is trying to deliver, which is why I'm presenting them as potential solutions, not as things that are already decided. The points that have been raised around the
businesses, the points that have been raised around the knock-on parking impacts are exactly what that transport and accessibility work would need to do with the members of the community that are affected. So it's not that it's been predetermined. What has been determined or is being determined is that the car park is already being lost because of the natural processes of the due consumption. And I can walk anybody down there to show them that now if they want me to, but Justin will be able to do the same in terms of how it's changing over time. So I think that's, I can't really say any more than that in terms of, other than that there is the opportunity to discuss that and input on it.
I'll just add, yes, that's the last jury event that we had a couple of months ago. So we talked about supporting visioning, and we still want to do that. Sort of sitting down, pen and paper, and saying, well, what's it? You know, what can we do? What does the frontage need to look like in order to respond to climate change? I think the key point, just to sort of bear it, to sort of keep in mind, is that when we talk about the car park. The car park is occupying space that the beach is going to want to occupy. Yes, you could hold the car park there, maintain every car parking space, but you're going to start to have less beach. Is the beach the most important asset to the
Yes.
That's the key. That's what I just asked everyone to bear in mind. We can't stop. What do? We can't stop that sea coming out. Mean low water position is moving in slowly. You hold the car park that long, the beach is going to get smaller, and you're going to lose sand offshore. Lots of sand is generally good for certain conditions. So I think it's just we just got to sort of keep that in mind.
Believe that we are talking about now. Climate change is something that is not just every year, every decade, it gets worse and worse and worse. And you have to take it into consideration. Car parks in long term basis is just lost. There's no way it's taken. You need to take it into consideration. If you go back to the presentations we saw earlier, you could see that in fact the whole of that area, the whole of the beach was completely swamped by the sea by about 20th century. The car park is on the same level. In fact, what we should be discussing is what is the future of Bude with no beaches? Because those beaches, both of the beaches, are going to get much smaller or possibly going to disappear. Particularly, in any case, the coastal erosion is only one small aspect of how Bude will be affected. We talked about, somebody pointed out how much rain has come down over the past few months, and how all the farmers' fields, and I'm a farmer, all the farmers' fields are all completely underwater, or at least so bad that nobody can actually get the farm machinery on it. Therefore, you lose whatever you planted, and you can't actually continue the farming process. Hopefully it will get better in the next few weeks. Right now, nobody can do anything anymore. That's going to get worse. It's going to get better. In 5 years' time, it's going to be worse. How are we going to cope with that? How are we going to get local food produced these type of conditions? Those are the questions we should be asking for. Not worrying about sand or a car park or a few car park spaces. That's just ridiculous.
Sorry, it's down the back corner. Oh, sorry, this gentleman here, back corner, and then Darky, so I can see you twitching.
The Jews are emotive, but we must remember they're very, the majority, I
life of you, there have been no submarine schemes. They only came about when we had the sewage scheme digging up somebody's car park. The South West Water gave, I think, £7,000 management costs. Going to the car park, I see no reason why the car park has to be completely storm-proof. We need a place to park cars. But if the occasional high tide inundates the car park, so what? We can close the car park until the storm is over.
So, Brian Sibley, own Life's Beach, which is at the top of the beach. We employ 15 full-time staff up there. There are 3 families living off the 3 businesses up there. Last year, during the summer, we had 43 members of staff. Now, how the hell am I going to get any staff or business up there with the Somebody's Beach covered in sand? My next thought is, should I get compensation, maybe from the Environment Agency, because it appears that they have an enormous amount of money to throw away. Man from the Environment Agency, give me some money on one. Because this business, which is a £1.5 million business over the 3 shops up there, £1.5 million will not be viable. Will close.
Well, once again, just to reiterate, we are presenting the evidence based on good data and saying, look, these are going to be the impacts. What are we going to do together to manage and mitigate these impacts? This is certainly not about putting anybody out of business or, and I think sort of recently made it clear, the car park, there's no suggestion that the car park is all suddenly going to be sort of done away with. So, but I just go back to my former point. We've got a decreasing amount of area that the beach and the car park both want to occupy. So we've got to come up with a compromise. What are we going to do?
I think the other thing to highlight is the challenges that you're talking about are something that is being faced by coastline communities across the coastline nationally. So, as I said earlier on, the 3 million is to try and help plan in terms of how the types of issues that you're talking about don't become an issue potentially to stop you operating or running the business. The compensation issue, I'm not even going to touch because it's not within my remit, but from a national perspective, these are the types of questions that national government are going to be facing in the very near future and already are facing on the Riding Coast. People have private businesses, homes. What happens as a result of them potentially being impacted or lost? That's, I think, all I will try, and I'm not trying to pass it off, but it is a much wider discussion than something that we can answer for you.
I just want to know
Where are you?
I just got on to the fact that we're worried about some things that's going to happen. But I didn't understand that. I'm presuming that the beach is going to be covered by extra sand or sand, but that's not going to happen for years. Yeah? Is that what am I understanding that correctly now?
It's already happening slowly.
Yeah, slowly. But over the last, I would
So over those years, the council alone has been in, and you said to digger, sandbag energy when the sand dunes were there. Is there any way that we can actually put that sand on the beach, make the beach monitoring?
Charlie, please be polite. Be polite, Sharky.
He's on the experiment. Well, listen, mate. I'm going to school in a big high school. I used to drive to water. This is the Stratton in Birmingham, nothing new. And it's not going to change overnight. It's the same this place. Well, flooded this place like 4 years ago. Well, flooded salt water, was it? It's fresh water. All these year places, the sea coming in. Worry about that. Worry about what's coming down. Because that's what's coming
Yeah, I think there and then there, and then we'll go to the guys at back.
The point that was made about the 3 million. Looking at the timeline, everything's got to be presented by 2027. Is that £3 million actually just to come up with a report, or is it also going to delivering?
The answer I will give you is some of that will depend on what the community want to see. If you don't want to see anything, then essentially you're in the position where you might want to give the money back. So.
Use it for something more practical, like clearing the beach.
I've set out what the funding that I as an officer been given to be able to deliver can do. We're happy to have that discussion with the community as part of that change management plan to see how that is used. Like I said, the things that I've set out there aren't certainties at all in any way, but they're options. And there's plenty of other options that are being thrown out, but I don't set the rules in terms of what the funding can be used. That is the UK government, essentially. And it has to be done in line with the policies and what it says in the policy that it's set out. So, yes, potentially, but it's not just going to be a report. There needs to be some practical action at the end of the project, but that work in the report, as you're referring to, needs to inform what that practical change is going to look like. That's where you need to work with the community to work that out. So, no, it needs to be changed as a practical change as well as £3 million for a very expensive report.
Yeah, and just to reiterate that the Cornwall Council have very much got their hands tied in terms of what they can and can't spend that on. That the sort of the criteria in terms of how that money is spent is set by central government. And I recommended you to central government to difference as a community that I thought was ready to take £3 million and spend it in responding to climate change. And that was my recommendation. And they agreed, and I set the evidence out in front of them, and that included, as you know, as Robert said, the fact that the jury existed helped us make that case, but not just the jury, because the community as a whole, I have seen over the last few years, it has been the community within Cornwall that's most ready to respond and use that money in a way which is not just going to be about building reports, because as we sort of said, it's not for that. And the government is making these type of grants available because this is a really serious
an urgent issue that we are all facing. So I just want to make it clear that, you know, Bromley Council they have to adhere to the rules that have been set down in terms of how that money can be spent.
Just to go back to that comment that I where somebody said we have to use the car park overnight. Well, apparently, as far as I know, making space for that project is expected to be by 2027. That's only 3 years away. Yeah. So is that correct?
No, it's not correct.
What's the time scale?
The time scale that we've got is to lose the car.
Yeah.
I mean, that was provided in the visualization.
Yes.
So it's going to be transitional incremental. I don't think anyone can give a definite dotted line on the sand.
50 years.
Well, yeah, it seems to show in those visuals that you're going to lose some of it in 25 years and you'll lose some of it at further horizon.
Why can't we keep clearing it now? While we're
I think it's going to, we think,
let's clear it now, let's keep clearing it while the sky wants to go on.
just, I mean, I think we just reiterate the point that Justin made earlier, is that the beach is primed for back. And if you make the decision to maintain that car park space, you'll have less beach space. So we need to be mindful that that coastline, that beach is rolling back. And the space which we are using currently as a car park will become a dune naturally. We're seeing it happen now. So we could, but what it means that later on, when you do see those catastrophic events and you see erosion after that, you'll end up with the coastline rapidly eroding what is an area of the car park, and there will be no very limited protection to the community behind it. So the benefit of doing something with the dune now is you're building that resilience proactively rather than responding to the change reactively at a later date. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Does it work having sand over the tarmac? Is that a duty?
Sorry, what was that?
If the sand is over the tarmac, does that still do the same job? Or
To a lesser extent, I mean, the sand is incredibly dynamic. It likes, you know, wind, rain, all these different things will influence how the wave action, they all influence how it behaves. If you put tarmac on the top, it can't act like it would do if it was loose and unconsolidated. So having a tarmac cap on top of the dune means it's not going to behave like a dune. One thing we will be surveying, and hopefully you will have some data on this by the end of the summer, is to find out exactly how deep the sand we have is until we hit bedrock. And I think we know the answer to that in places like Crooklets, when they did the work on the transatlantic cables. I think it's only a couple of meters. I think Councillor Roy was in one of the trenches, pulling up bits of petrified forest, and it's only a couple of meters down. So we haven't got a huge amount of sand to play with. The situation on some of these, I don't have an answer. I don't think I've seen rock exposed at the top of the beach.
The sand on top of the tarmac.
Yeah.
Does that do the job that you're saying? Becoming
It will do. I mean, what the sand would want is something to keep it in situ. But yes, it would do. Yeah. Sand on the top. I mean, it will be something that will be exposed as a layer, like the tarmac on the beach in the future. But there is a consideration, if we do want this to happen, do we want to break up the tarmac, or do we want to just have the sand build up on top? That's something I'm sure that the conversation will come out of the CTAP project.
I think just to cover off the point that's been raised a couple of times now around maintaining the car parking space in the interim, the project that I've talked about in terms of CTAP and making space, that funding can be used to do things that Cornwall Council would do as normal maintenance activities. How Cornwall Council chooses to allocate its funds to do other things, perhaps maintaining its car parks, etc., is not something that the project can affect. But it doesn't mean that Cornwall Council, in another way, and affect that potentially in the interim, if they wanted to essentially, but the officers that we are from what project doesn't have the ability to do that.
Sandy better than building a concrete wall then. So, build a concrete wall, it's not going to last as well as sand. Is that correct?
No, the point about the concrete wall, if you put a concrete wall in place, then you'll sort of lose the sand that's in front of it, and your vehicle gradually be drowned out, because we can't stop the mean low water position advancing inland. That's the point of it. So a concrete wall is much less sustainable, and certainly much less helpful in terms of maintaining a healthy beach, which I think we all want, than allowing the sand to do.
I misunderstood what you said. I thought you said Sandy better.
My worry is that some people here are not getting the idea that these are just recommendations. No one here is standing here telling you today, this is what we are going to do, and this is the outcome. Because no one knows what the outcome is, and no one knows what will happen if we do this or do that. These are recommendations in the hope that this will get everyone talking and working together and coming up with perhaps different ideas, different suggestions. No one is saying the car park's going to be gone in a week, find somewhere else to park. It's not going to happen. What we're saying is if we do nothing now, the car park will be gone. If we don't want to save the car park, we'll save the car park, but then the beach is gone. So what would you rather have? Would you rather have a fully functioning car park and no beach? And so no one's going to come here anyway, because you're not going to have a beach to come to. My other issue is that, we're going to try and save that car park for the businesses and for the young people. Equally, if we do nothing and just worry about this car park and making sure we've all got somewhere to park, there's not going to be anything for our young people. There won't be anything. So I think we just need to listen in the recommendations to get people talking and to come up with ideas and suggestions. Not, this is what's going to happen and that's the end.
Use your words carefully.
No. You got £3 million, all right?
I haven't got the idea, I know.
All this next meeting I had again, because that's part of the right word, which part of the defense view.
On what, sorry?
You don't put these people. Yeah, that's meeting I had again, and this is something unprepared. It could get worse, that's part of the defense abuse, but all this money, instead of going out, spend it, do something for you.
That's not the information, because as Rick said earlier, we'll be looking to maintain the break, because you're absolutely right, it's important. So.
They're more than let them go.
I think the only challenge is the funding for the CTAP project could not be used at a location where the policy is hold the line. And the policy on New Breakwater, where Tommy's bit is hold the line. So the fund, that 3 million funds could not be used for that purpose. And that's been dictated.
I'd like to go back to the appointment of the climate change bureau. At the beginning, somebody said that this was randomly selected, and they went on to say it was representative of the whole community. It cannot be random and both representative.
I suggest that the appointment of Mr. was deputy and managed appointment once they're excused for that.
Thank you. That's a very good question. So, thank you. So we work with an organisation called the Sortition Foundation. And they do this all the time. They did it in the UK government several times, the Scottish government. As I said, we've had about 175 applications. What happens in that process is that a computer algorithm gets 40 people, and then it says, do we meet all of them? Do those 40 people meet the criteria? Is there any, the right split of gender, the right spread of ages, the right number of people who are disabled? There's the same proportion in our community. In answer to Darky's question, how many of these people are born here and how many people have moved in, or incomers, and is that the same proportion as in the whole community? Are the incomes the same? And if those 40 people chosen that first time fulfill those criteria, then that's the jury. They've been randomly selected and they fit into all those different pots. If they don't, then we'll go back into the pot and it selects again, and it keeps on doing that until it gets the right distribution. So it's a long process done by a computer that happens all the time. The Sortition Foundation have a website. They show you how you can do it with any number of people. Thank you.
The point is, until there is an alternative, somebody should be maintained.
Just to add on, that has been well documented and kind of understood in terms of feedback. It's as a part of the process of doing it.
I'm not really that hung up on how hard it is.
Just hold it.
Yeah. I wish that. Is that easy? Tom, it's on there. Okay, I'm going to enough discussions about that today. My question is for the long-term view of all this. So we know that the Flood and Waste Management Act of 2010 existed, and that led to strategy being developed for erosion and risk management in 2011. We're now in 2024. It's 10 years long to have these discussions. We know the project's going on until 2027. At what point after that do we anticipate changes being made, looking for the long-term future? Because we can discuss car parks all we like now. I know there's coastal erosion. I also know there are changes. I also know there are changes to the environment. We all know that. But where do we stand once all this research has been done? When does that start making change? Anyone have an idea?
Well, I think it depends on this process and the discussion. I think the important thing is, we recognise that investment is required to help to understand what the community wants, what those changes need to look like, what does the response look like, what are our priorities. So, I think actually the view, the funding is already coming in to sort of help those changes start to occur. I think that's, so we had you referred to the Flood Management Act 2010, the SMP came along in 2011. The national strategy was adopted in 2020. So we're getting there, but these things, although, it is obvious, car parks and car parking. Very important for everybody. It is a motor subject everywhere, not just in views. And we do need to spend time working out the details, those sorts of things.
Yeah, but I'm trying to get on that. What I'm wanting is, do you have plans to go forward? You know, the project's going to 2027, that's great. But what happens after that? At what point do we start to see things being duplicated? Because we know that the wheels are very, very slow. So that's why I'm asking. I don't get to know that. I want to know what is viewed in 20 years' time, what is viewed in 25 years' time. As I'm sure so many people want to know. Because I don't have this here, but there are people who do.
So some of the funding, 3 million, needs to be spent by 2027. And some of that will need to make actual changes. So some of that will happen by 2027, depending on the discussion as to what the community and the funding allows. So, I mean, you're out on a limb here. I don't think too many people would have an issue with the accessibility of the sand rails along adjacent to the canal being something that is done as an improvement for accessibility purposes. So that is the type of thing that the money could fund by the end of 2027. Your question about what does the view look like in 20 years is exactly what the coastal change management plan looks to do. It looks at what will view look like in that period using some of the science, but then what does the community want it to evolve like as well, and when will it happen? So exactly the types of things about you're asking, when will change happen, is what that will set out essentially. But it's also set out what money do we need to do that potentially, or do we need to go to the Environment Agency or central government for that funding to do, or in some instances, what do we need to rely on the community, much like Storm Tower, to be able to fund or to be involved in, I suppose. So some of the money is going to be spent by 2027 to deliver those changes, but in a way that everybody is hopefully in some way on board with, combined with that longer look over a 25, 50 and 100-year period. So hopefully that answers the question.
Can I just expand a little bit, Richard, and network theory? Looking outside of you, some of the communities that I'm working with, they've come to us and said, we've got an idea, we want to do this, can you help make it happen? And things are happening now. You know, we've got one location where a landowner said, well, I've got a toilet, but I'm really up on the beach, can you help me move it to a car park much further back? Of course I can. So I think in some instances, we're talking some really big things here. Sometimes you need to instill them down into smaller actions that are more palatable, more bite-sized, because the ability to deliver everything all at once in 2027 isn't going to be easy, but there's certain elements, some things we can and we should be looking at this in little bite-sized pieces sometimes rather than the big all, because doing the big all at once is going to be incredibly challenging. So that does come down to what the community want to accept in the short term, in the medium term, and the long term as well. So it's important that you look at it in a almost like a jigsaw puzzle, a Lego set. Look at what you can do. Deal with some of the small easies. I mean, a good example of it will be we want to have more active gene people. We've got resource. We can give them kits, we can give them training, we can give them support if they want interpretation to do. Heck, we can help them with that as well. That's a really simple. Forget about the gene expanding that I'm talking about what we have now. We can do that now. You may not think that's a big thing, but it's a big cultural shift when it comes to what people are doing and how they're interacting with the environment. So I think we just need to sometimes take away from the fact that we need to do some big things. Sometimes it's the small things that matter. And I think, you know, the 2-minute foundation view, the 2-minute, you know, little big events, that's just 2 minutes of your time. A lot of people think 2 minutes makes a massive difference. Take that ethos to this, and we can all collectively achieve something brilliant together. So I think we need to instill that kind of ethos into what we're doing, as well as thinking there's a big fix that the EA or Common Council are going to have to deliver.
And just to add, and this goes back to the gentleman's earlier question around, well, is everything going to be done now, or is it going to be bit by bit? And what we established is that it's an incremental response to climate change. Because we don't just put all our eggs in one basket in year one, as we said before, because what if we underestimate it? What if the climate science comes back in 10 years' time, tells us that sea level rise is going to be twice as bad as we thought it was going to be today? Then we've got to come back and say, actually, it's not enough. So it's that incremental journey. And that's what we've got to all accept, that we are on a pathway, and it is going to be an incremental process. But it means, like Johnny says, that we can do bite-sized bits of work, interventions here and there, and in aggregate, they will come together to help us respond.
I've got to take maybe you put your arm down, I'll come to you next, okay?
Good evening. Hope it's working. Close enough to me. I'll just sit and listen to people's opinions and so on about the sand dunes particularly, and I wonder if some people, not like me, who grown up here, can remember what it used to be like. And I've played on the beaches for many hours, and there were no sand dunes there at all, just a couple of mounds of a few bits of mangrove, and they were really created in the 1980s. Now, I know Jones said you can go back to 2006, I think, to see how they changed. But you need to go back to 1900 or something to see how it's changed, because they were never there. And if they weren't there, you wouldn't be able to put sand, you'd blow on the car properly, blow wood off and back into the river and back around again like it used to be circulated in quick-bits, and it was a closed circuit. But humanity interfered, planted all those marm grass, put picket fences up, and created them. And there seems a bit of an obsession about the sand dunes, as if they're sort of sacrosanct. But I think we need to, officers that need to look further back and then not be so worried about them creeping into the car park, just clear it, push it back onto the beach as such. And I'm a bit, I do question some of the science as well, because when I was a child, I remember when there had been an ice age by the year 2000. That's what the solar experts said in the 1970s, and it's not happened. Although the last few days, I think it's been pretty positive success. But it hasn't happened, and I do wonder whether some of the predictions are a bit excessive. They might not be. Who knows? It's an unknown science, really. I'm not saying these aren't changing.
Well, I mean, just on that last point.
We're all going back to ice age still.
But we are measuring sea level rise and aggregate. ULIN, which is the class they get, is the main gauge for the UK. So it is, but it is, it's small, but yes, we are measuring. So we do know that is. And I think it's, yeah, of course, we always learn more by looking back, and I think it's a really good point back to you've not been there. But in my opinion, better off with the dunes there, and actually I think that bit of marrow planting and just that paving going up, well, maybe that was an early and unanticipated early resilience measure, because we've got a better stock of sand there now, which is going to help us create a buffer against increasing storminess and storm waves. So it feels like it's irrespective of when they were or weren't there, it's a good thing to have them there now. And if you can work with them and retain that sediment, then it's going to help build resilience for the
Just to quickly add, I think we've just got to be mindful that we've only started collecting data, really detailed data, LiDAR data, understanding how sediment is moving since 2003. We don't actually have really good quality data before that, and I do see a value. I mean, I'm always one for looking back to build forward. And if you look at the Making Space for Sand website, we've got some great comparison images of what you used to look like and what it looks like now. And I think those pictures are really telling. And I mean, but before you were even born, we've got some great pictures of what some of these look like in 1893 on that website when sand was only just started to be removed from the beach. And you can see 20 years later, after those images, 30 years later, bits of sand building up in hummocks. So you can see this evidence even before the work that was carried out by the EA and South West Water with the CSA. There was a different texture to the beach. It wasn't just flat. It was building up as you would expect a dune would. So, but I think what you're saying is kind of encouraging. What you're saying is that the location in your lifetime, you've seen change. Well, imagine we're going to see more change in the future, but that change will be underlaid with sea level rise and increased storm frequency. So we're just going to realise we're in quite a dynamic transient environment here, and fixing lines on it, well, it's not going to work because the environment is not going to obey those rules. We just need to be mindful of that.
Okay, these next two, and then I'm going to bring it into the council, we have to on the side what we're going to do.
Yeah. Only Malcolm, I'm blowing, about 14 years. It seems to me we're a little bit fixated on this £3 million. Like a clarification on exactly what the fine print says. So the 2027 deadline, is that for approval of the plan? Is it for having to spend the money? Is it having to spend some of the money? Point one. Point two, you talk about inclusivity, opinions from the community. You sent 8,000 letters out. I didn't get one. My friend here didn't get one. Who else didn't get one?
If we lived in Bude-Stratton, you should have got one because I electronically signed every one of them. Obviously, there's one signature and Hayden's done, but I know those letters went out. Yeah, excuse me, but I'm answering the question. Check your post. Well, you don't live in the right address then. One or the other.
Yeah, the first I heard about this whole process was the Facebook post about a week ago. I don't know how many of the others in here were aware of this process going on. It seems to me that our council as a whole, now I'm talking about all the parts of the council and their associates, are very good at doing stuff, but not so good at informing the community before decisions are made.
Are you talking all council?
I'm talking about anything that's involving you.
I'm dragging my phone up now and showing you 20 or 30 posts about this in the Bude-Stratton post. I read the article this morning. It was on the BBC News. I mean, other than sending, I don't mean to make a joke out of it, but other than sending up smoke signals, I think we did it.
Mike, do you want me to answer?
You can do it, yeah.
So it appeared in the national, it appeared in 3 national newspapers. It appeared on BBC Cornwall, on BBC Devon. It was on Spotlight. It was on BBC Cornwall's website. It was in.
When was this?
This was. It's been throughout, but it started about last May. Okay, and there was May, and then around the time of the first jury sessions, which was about September. It happened again in November. It happened quite recently. There's something on the One Show, which is, it's mentioned that on a One Show thing that's coming up about the Storm Tower.
Banners on the A39.
There were banners on the A39. There were banners at Flexbury. There were banners on Summer, just above Summerleys by the lifeboat station. It's been on lots of social media. It's been on our website. It's all been out there. Now, I don't know what we could do. We could come round to your house and knock on the door and tell you. As regards the letters, okay, so there was a
the presentation that you did tonight.
Yeah.
Why wasn't that published?
It is. It is
Well,
published.
it's now.
It was published. It's been on a website. We published it on Facebook, on our website, on other social media like Instagram, not Twitter, I don't think. It is also been, it's been everywhere. I'm sorry, you
With
just
all
didn't.
the fine detail about the 3 million and the dates and everything.
You didn't.
I think the difference here is whether we're talking about the recommendations.
No, I'm talking about the recommendations.
From the jury.
Yes.
Right, so the details of the recommendations were put out publicly. It has happened. Do you follow Bude-Stratton Town Council on its social media? Yeah. But so you don't follow, so if you want to know about things that the town council are doing, you need to follow the town council. If you want to know things that we're doing, you need to follow us. We encourage people to follow.
But I think back to my original question about funding.
Yeah. So,
can you answer those?
Okay. Forgive me, I've forgotten what.
Well, in essence, if you spent 100 quid of that 3 million by 2027, it's the rest of that money ring fence until you spend it.
No, the money has to be spent by the 27th. The other point.
So we're desperate to spend the money, is what it boils down to. Yes, in a nutshell.
If it's not spent, it goes back to
Yeah,
national government. It represents a potential missed opportunity to use the money in
It's only an opportunity if it's beneficial.
Well, exactly. Not going to disagree with you on that point, but if it's not spent, we don't sit on it, it's not given to the council. It goes back.
Because it's not to spend it rather than allocate it to projects.
It has to be spent by March 2027.
Well, I don't think you've got time to do it.
What's he going to explain?
But the things I outlined in the presentation, essentially. What you're missing a little bit here is that the 3 million has been awarded as a result of the work the jury has done, not all of it, but in a large part because there was an active community, which you weren't part of the jury, right? I appreciate that. But you're here now and talking to us about it. So in a way, the jury has further done its job in terms of it's brought yes, it may have been that you saw it via a Facebook post, but we're actually discussing it here and now, rather than it have going on in 3 years and you not being aware of it. So I think the point that we're trying to make around the community still being able to be involved, no decisions have been taken in terms of what's happening. I think I was very clear about that in the presentation. So I think that's what I want to reinforce, essentially.
We go to that gentleman's presentation before.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can.
So this was the remark point. I think we got out of the jury invitation. I'm guessing we didn't send invitations out to people living in your house. Was it just you and Stratton? Was that was in your house?
You know better than me.
So it went to, the invitations went to every household. Now, if you're not registered on the electoral poll, or your household isn't part of what used to be the Bude Community Network area, so that's Bude-Stratton and the surrounding parishes from the border north of Morwenstow down as far as Upper Crackington, between Crackenhaven and Boscastle, and inland as far as the border as well. There's a small part of Bridge Rule that doesn't form part of it because Bridge Rule has a Devon postcode, but the rest of it is. Well, sorry, it's got a Holsworthy. It's part of the Holsworthy post. Sorry.
Okay. Anyway, thanks for going on how good that was. So I'm here representing UK, which isn't as large as the wage riders. We only got 70 or 80 members. But we've been running from Sundays for approaching 30 years. And we've brought several world champions into the community. We have several current national champions, and we're quite active. Some of these has been incredibly important for us because it's a learning space, it's a safe space with access to ways, it's sheltered, and it's made a hell of a lot of difference to our fun and our success. What I would say is that in previous years we walked from the Crescent car park down to some of this, and that has not affected our membership at all or participation at all. People are flexible, people find ways around the changing environment and our changing circumstances. What we couldn't cope with and what we couldn't continue to deal with is if that sound disappears. So if we believe that maintaining that concrete and allowing those dunes to be driven away right up to the concrete, and then the sand's going to get washed out to sea and end up with no beach, that's the end for the surf community and the new club and everything else that we built up. So I don't know that that's true, but I would really request that you weigh up very carefully the difference between the inconvenience of having less parking and the impact of that versus losing our sand. Because if we lose that sand and we lose our beach, that's it for our farm, probably for all of the other circulating clubs in the area.
Right. We've got about 11 minutes. Yeah, I was going to say we're coming to council now.
I probably don't need no part over anything for that much credit. My understanding is sand is continually being created. Yes? Because it's small particles, there's rocks put together, etc., sand is continually being created. So we will always be getting more and more sand. In the main space for sand project, are we going to allow the sand dunes to block the flow of the river?
Well,
Because the more the sand dunes block, as Darky said, the threat to the town hasn't been so much waves coming in, it's been water coming down. The more we get built up, the more runoff we get. The more the river gets blocked there, the more potential for flooding. Are we going to allow the sand dunes to block the river?
I think in answer to that question, the flow of the river will ensure that the small grains of sand will migrate back onto the lower shore of the beach as part of the cycle that was discussed and raised earlier, like back in the good old days. That's what happened. Well, that will continue to happen. I think we need to be mindful as well that the boundary of said river is reinforced with gabion baskets, which are in most instances stopping it encroaching significantly. Now, I think you may argue, well, some of those gabions were removed a few years ago. That hasn't resulted in the blockage of the river needs. In fact, what it's allowed is for that sediment to more easily cycle back onto the lower shore.
Even a very small flow of water will maintain a channel, so it continues to flow out. And you're absolutely right that sand continues to be created, but you've got to have the space for it to accumulate. Don't allow any space to accumulate, and that sand's going to go somewhere else. And that's the thing.
We always have some issue.
Yeah,
They dredge, absolutely, they dredge finish them.
Well,
They continue taking sand away.
yeah, I think that
If we not take our sand away, it's commodity.
well, I don't think we want to do that, but I think you need to be mindful of the fact you're talking about dredging sand in the Camel Estuary. If you look at the state of rock dunes, it's actually, we've seen significant erosion of that dune. Maybe not directly related to dredging activities, but I think what it goes to show is the complexity of the systems. And I think what I hope we will achieve with the Making Space for Sand project is a much better understanding of those sediment pathways. You talk about, sand constantly being made, it's true, but is that sand constantly going to be washing onto the beach and moving up the shore? Well, we don't know how it's going to behave. We don't know. We don't know up here that there's lots of sand offshore, it'll wash in. That's the hearsay. What we need is the evidence to demonstrate that that is going to happen. So it's dynamic and, it is an important part of Bude. But the real concern, you say it's always been here at Bude. You go to Crooklets and there's less and less sand there. And we know that in Crooklets there's only 2 meters until you hit bedrock. So it's not always going to be there. We don't know that for certainty.
So, okay, I'm not going to hit you with another emotive speech. I'm just going to say a couple of things which I escaped my mind earlier on. Firstly, and I know it's been said, but I don't think it's been said by a member of the council, thank you to the Bude Climate Jury, because it was a lot of work. And you have had quite a bit of pushback, and a lot of the things that have been said about your recommendations, they're not really about your recommendations. They're about aspects of these gentlemen's work. Your recommendations are not quite the same as some of the things that have been presented this afternoon. So I think we need to bring it back to what we as a council are going to have to vote on in a minute. And the recommendations from the Bude Climate Jury are measured. They're not riding a coach and horses through the economic viability of this town. And they also critically hold these gentlemen and other aspects of Cornwall Council to account. And the problem I have is that these gentlemen are here. But where is the member talking about economics? Where is the member talking about transport? Where is the joined up thinking that these gentlemen, they're not responsible for that, but there is no joined up thinking at Cornwall Council. And the bit that I think we're all forgetting here is the climate jury and the recommendations of the climate jury give us something that we can use to hold these gentlemen and other people in authority to account. It's a tool that the community can use. And if we want to dismiss that, if we want to say, oh, I'd rather not lose the car park spaces, or I'd rather not be able to, I want to be able to park and take the surfboard right at the sea, and that rides the coach and horses over the top of these solid and moderate recommendations, we're missing a trick. These are a way in to hold these gentlemen and other people in authority to account. And that's one of the key reasons why I think we should be supporting it.
I've got 5 minutes, so I'll make it quick on the reference again.
I'm confident we're going to get the job done. So we've actually heard about two very distinct and separate issues here tonight. One of which is, of course, the Bude Climate Partnership's proposals, and the other, which of course is the Vacant Space for Sand project. And the Vacant Space for Sand project, understandably, has been it's caused some tensions, and I think it's only right and proper that we listen very carefully to what people are thinking, what businesses are thinking, and to understand properly what it means to our community for this Vacant Space for Sand project to proceed as it is planned.
And CTAP.
And CTAP. One of the things that does give me heart is something that Julian said a few moments ago. In the Vacant Space for Sand project, actually, it's not just about making it happen, it's also about understanding much more about how the sand is flowing and moving around our community. Because I know that Rob Ewley said earlier that a certain councillor had asked his making the geography A level about the sand. Well, that councillor was me. But I will say, it wasn't a making the geography A level, it was a world-renowned doctor of geology who I have to know very well. And he asked me to ask a question about how sand accumulates in Bude, and what methodology we give to that. And the answer that I actually had wasn't quite as satisfactory as I hoped. And I think that the work that John and his team are going to do will answer those questions much more satisfactorily as I thought at the time. So it's always worth having an inquiry mind. Science, in my opinion, should always be challenged. That's the way you get better science. And even if I am a rank amateur, I don't mind asking questions. And in my book, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Right, talking of well too long. Let's focus our minds back on the Bude Climate Partnership. And I'm going to make a proposal here. This is now formal business for the council, so I should look at the mayor whilst I do this. So I should always address the mayor. He is our chairman. I formally propose that we thank the Bude Climate Partnership and the jury for their work, and that the recommendations are formally received and the asks considered by the council and referred to a working group that considers the costs and staff commitment. A formal response will be made at the July full council meeting. The reason I do this is because I know already that our budgets are under extreme pressure, We have 20.5% increase on our preset the last round of council tax, and our budgets are effectively already pre-spent up until 2025. So I think that we need to do due diligence to carefully consider what the jury has recommended to us and come back with a very careful answer that takes into account everything that they have created.
Before I address that, I'm going to propose we extend to 15 minutes, or we will be legally allowed to vote on it.
Yeah.
All in favour?
What is it, second councillor who was proposing, please?
Okay. Vote on, does everybody understand the proposal? Could you repeat the proposal, please?
I think there's been some compilation between the recommendations and the jury asked. And I'd like that to be.
Could I can't quite hear you, sorry.
I think there's been some amount of compilation between the jury recommendations and the jury asks. And I'd like that to be clarified in the proposal.
I'll read out very carefully. So the first part is the planning partnership, I think that's the exhibit. Right, and the recommendations and asks are formally received by the Bude-Stratton Town Council, and then referred to a work group that considers costs and staff commitment. A full response to be made at the July full council meeting. Is that satisfying?
It's clear.
Okay. Is everybody happy? Understand what we're about to vote on? Yeah. Okay. All in favour? Against? Abstained? Motion. Well done. Thank you all for coming.